If perhaps your life looks completely put together from the outside, but inside you feel like the bleep is constantly hitting the fan, you are not alone. And if your first instinct is to sit down and try to figure everything out, that may actually be the very thing that's keeping you stuck. Here's why so many capable women get stuck. We try to solve overwhelm by forcing ourselves to figure it out right now. We go over every detail. We replay conversations. We argue with people who aren't even in the room. We run down the road trying to cross bridges we haven't even reached yet. And we may even notice this physically, the clenched jaw, the hunched shoulders, the shallow breathing. When everything feels like it's too much, thinking harder, using our mental capacity to get us out of the situation, usually isn't what gets you out of it. In fact, it just turns up the pressure. So today, we are stopping that cycle. I want to show you what helps before clarity, before taking a single step, before trying to make a single decision, because the first move matters more than people realize. So when you're in the middle of that cycle, right, everything feels urgent, not because every single thing is an emergency, but because your mind and your body are reacting like it is. Again, maybe you're replaying that conversation you had with your boss for the 10th time. You're mentally arguing with somebody who isn't even in the room. That's something that I do all the time when I'm deeply unhappy with a situation. It might be like trying to solve the problem at 2 o'clock in the morning by constantly thinking about it. You're running through every possible outcome, hoping that you'll finally feel better. You'll come to a solution and feel better. Maybe it's the push-pull of knowing what you should do, but not really wanting to do it. It's when you're spinning your wheels, you're looping the same stressful thoughts over and over, and you're burning massive amounts of energy without getting any closer to an answer. You're frantically trying to find a way out of the situation. But here's where things get interesting. And again, this is where a lot of people get trapped. Because what starts trying to solve a real problem slowly turns into something else. Same thoughts, the same worries, the same conversations, the same mental rehearsals. It's going around and around without creating any real movement. That's what I call the spiral. And here's the part that no one talks about. The spiral rarely feels irrational while you're in the middle of it. It feels responsible. It feels productive. It feels urgent. It feels necessary. It feels like you'll finally solve the situation if you just keep thinking. And that's why so many people get stuck. It's not like we're trying to avoid the problem. We're desperately trying to solve it. But the problem is that the spiral disguises itself as problem solving. But that pressure we're feeling actually changes the quality of our thinking. Our thinking gets more narrow. We get more harder edged with our thinking. We lose access to nuance and creativity. Our mind does a great job at scanning for problems, but when we're in this kind of like a mental loop, it does a terrible job at seeing options, which means that any solution you come up with inside that spiral usually reflects the spiral. You're deciding from fear or exhaustion or maybe even frustration. And then the longer you stay inside that kind of a loop, the more convincing it becomes. Not because you're getting closer to an answer, but because you're feeding the same pressure that's distorting your thinking in the first place. The pressure that is driving the thinking is also limiting the thinking. And that's why interruption matters. Again, it's not that the problem isn't real. It's not that we're trying to avoid it. It's because the version of us trying to solve it right now doesn't have full access to perspective. So interruption isn't avoidance. It's what I like to call access restoration. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I started offering the Spark Reconnection sessions, because I've realized that many women like us don't need another meditation, more advice, or another 10-step plan. Often we need to stop carrying around um, everything that we've been carrying around long enough to hear ourselves underneath it all. And so if what I'm describing sounds familiar, there's a link below in the description here if you'd like to continue that conversation. So I'm not telling you to ignore, the situation, like the bill or pretend or your finances or whatever it might be that's plaguing you right now. It's not about pretending that the problem isn't real. What I want to do is offer you a different idea. The thing is that relief comes before clarity, right? Clarity does not come before relief. You don't need to solve the problem from the most overwhelmed version of yourself. In fact, that's often the worst time to try. Because once we can ease the pressure, even just a little bit, different thinking becomes available. The problem may not have changed and it may not have even gone away, but you have access to greater resources within yourself. And that changes everything. So, how do we actually do this? How do we stop that spiral when it feels completely justified? Or you just feel like, the only way to get out of the spiral is to solve the spiral. So I teach a practice called Pause Before Problem Solving. And despite the name, it's not about doing nothing. It's, again, not about pretending that the problem isn't real. It's not about forcing ourselves to think positive thoughts. It's about recognizing when we've slipped from problem solving into looping and choosing to not let that loop, that spiral, take control of the steering wheel. So it breaks down into two simple steps. Step one is awareness. It's the moment you're noticing. It's realizing your body is getting tighter, your shoulders are getting tighter, your blood pressure might be rising, you might be flushed in the face because of your blood pressure. Your breathing might become more shallow. It's noticing that you're, again, mentally arguing with that somebody who isn't even in the room, like you're rehearsing. You may, you know, you might be bracing for impact. You might be, you know, catastrophic, making it more catastrophic. Um, and that realizing moment is, it matters enormously because until you name it, you feel like you're getting lost in the problem. But the moment that you observe the spiral, you create a separation between who you are and what you're feeling, which leads directly into step two, the decision. As we just spoke about, sometimes the clue isn't really in our thoughts. It might be noticing what's going on with us physically, the clenched jaw, shoulders tight, maybe your stomach is in knots. And that's when you can realize you're taking those physical cues and you're realizing, there it is. Again, I'm not solving the problem, I'm replaying it. I'm not creating options, I'm running laps around the same fear. And from that place, you can make a simple choice, such as, I don't have to keep following this thought right now. I can come back to it later. The problem will still be there. The bill will still be there. The situation with my boss will still be there. The conversation will still be there. The decision will still be there. But for the next few minutes, I'm off the clock. Not forever, but because I want to come back to it with more perspective than I have access to right now. Now, here's the honest truth. Trying to clock out for even a few minutes entirely in your own head is actually hard once that spiral has built up momentum, especially when you're tense, your body is tense, your thoughts are loud, and you're trapped in that loop, right? So if you struggle to do this alone, just know it's not because you're weak. It's because the spiral is highly persuasive It wants to pull your attention back in. And that's exactly why I created an audio exercise called the 5-minute reset. Because awareness is one thing, making the decision to clock out for a few minutes is another. But what many discover is that the hardest part comes after all of that. It's redirecting your attention once the spiral has already built momentum. Because it's at that point we can get easily pulled right back in. So the 5-minute reset was built around everything that we've talked about so far today. Again, it won't force calm and it won't solve your problems right away, but it will help you recognize when you've slipped from problem solving into looping. It's going to help you clock out for a few minutes. It'll redirect your attention and it's going to restore access to the perspective that's hiding underneath all that pressure. Because sometimes the first step isn't actually solving the problem. Sometimes the first step is making sure the spiral isn't trying to solve it for you. So, I have included a link to that below. So feel free to check it out. And I thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.